Let's talk about this right here. So we're going to be talking about Hungary a lot next year because the Hungarian elections are coming up, and right now Viktor Orban is not looking too good. It's due to a few things. One has to do with multiple scandals, including the scandal where his ministers were covering up sex abuse scandals while being the Family Values Party. There's, of course, a litany of corruption scandals. The economy is not exactly in the best position, and going out and doing the big handouts, and that's really what you call them, handouts that he does around election time is not an end-all be-all solution anytime his numbers are down in the gutter. And so somebody who is actually a part of his party, a part of his Fidesz party, broke off and has an opposition party, and he's actually leading him in the polls right now, which is pretty uncommon. But then again, Viktor Orban's been down and out before, and he's been able to recover. He's been incredibly politically resilient, but so is everybody until they finally go down. So will he finally go down? I don't know. We have a year to find out. A lot can change at that time. That opposition figure was part of the Fidesz party. Well, he's part of the Fidesz party. Maybe something comes out. Maybe Fidesz is waiting for election time to release a bunch of dirt on him that's going to sink it. Maybe the coalition that united around this opposition figure, who is, trying to give like a wide net, broad swath offer to the public to be at least against Orban, maybe part of that coalition breaks off and that becomes a problem. As we can see with those trying to run against Mondami right now, when you have a split ticket, that can be quite an issue. Either way, a lot of time can pass in the next year before the next Hungarian elections. Hell, imagine if the war in Ukraine ended in that time. That would probably, or even just got a ceasefire in that time. That might have an effect. Who knows? So we're still a ways out, but right now, it's not looking too good for Viktor Orban. So expect a lot of Hungarian coverage on this channel next year. But before we get to next year, we need to talk about not even this year. We need to talk about right now. There was what I think is a pretty substantial story that I haven't seen covered a lot in Western media. I saw Politico cover it. I saw The Guardian cover it, but I didn't see much out of that. And that is the Hungarian General Staff reported that Hungarian drones, let me say that again, not Russian drones, not even Belarusian drones, Hungarian drones, drones under the banner of a NATO party, entered Ukrainian airspace. The Ukrainian General Staff posted a map of this, showing where it went and where it crossed, crossing into the more mountainous regions of the country. In the country's west, its southwest. And the immediate response from Hungary was, "You're crazy. Zelensky, you say that your drone came into our territory? You're losing your mind. You're crazy. You're insane. How dare you accuse a NATO country of sending a drone into Ukrainian area? That's ridiculous. You think he would violate their airspace, their sovereignty, their independence in that way? You think that a NATO party would be able to get away with doing something so flagrant at the same time the NATO is working towards supporting Ukraine's defense and Ukraine is getting invaded by the largest country on the planet? The same country, the same capital, same center of power in Moscow that at one point occupied Hungary too. And Viktor Orban was alive when those troops left. He was more than alive. Look in the history yourself. Let's read what they said about this, just to really absorb what they stated before they restated something else. Reconnaissance drones that violated Ukraine's airspace could have flown over from Hungary to check the industrial potential of western border areas, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Friday. So the Ukrainian president saying, look, if this drone's entering our western Ukrainian airspace, they could be using this to try to find out where our war factories are, the ones producing ammunition, the ones producing body armor, the ones producing long-range drones. Western Ukraine is safer than the rest of Ukraine when it comes to Russian drone attacks, so them concentrating war-making industry over there just makes sense. But if somebody could gather information about exactly where those factories are, or which factories that have been hit might still be in production but underground, if you use something that could penetrate the earth, if that information got into the hands of the Hungarians, and then they transfer over to their friends, the Russians could use that to make war upon Ukraine. Or for any other type of information. I mean, if they have that information, that's do you even need the Russians to do it? I mean, obviously that would give them an area removed from it. But how do we know they haven't done that? How would we know? We're considering how close the Hungarians and the Russians are and how hostile Viktor Orban's government is to Ukraine. It's not that ridiculous of a question to really ask, honestly. You know, you would hope it would be ridiculous. The Hungarians, a NATO party, would do such a thing, but their government has been so hostile to Ukraine and have targeted their right to really have their borders as a state. They've completely disregarded their international sovereignty on many occasions. They even at multiple times have had their advisors come out and say maybe Zelensky just should have surrendered. So they have been in very hostile positions to each other. So no, I don't think that is a ridiculous stretch. Now, here's what the Hungarian said in response. The foreign minister. President Zelensky is losing his mind to his anti-Hungarian obsession. He's now starting to see things that aren't there. Then this came out. Mind you, this is a report from September 27th. Here is yesterday's report. Yesterday, my time at least. It's now the 30th. But within 48 hours, it went from Zelensky's losing his mind to Viktor Orban on a podcast saying, so what? So what if we did it? So what if our drones entered Ukrainian territory? Because, and I quote, Ukraine is not an independent country. Let's suppose they flew a few meters into Ukraine. And so what? Ukraine is not an independent country. Ukraine is not a sovereign country. If we, that is the West, decide not to give it a single forint, that's like a Hungarian currency, tomorrow, Ukraine could shut down. Now, that's Politico's framing, the Western press. Maybe you don't believe it. Here's Viktor Orban saying it himself. I'll just play it in its full. If you want to read what he says, it comes up on screen. But I already said what he said. I don't need to repeat what he said. This is just the evidence of what he said.
Tehát Ukrajna nem Magyarországgal áll háborúban, Oroszországgal. Tehát neki a keleti irányú határán lévő drónokkal kéne foglalkozni. Itt NATO tagállamok vannak. Ukrajna hátországa biztonságban, hát innen nem támadja meg senki. Nem tudok, hogy a lengyelek, a románok, a magyarok vagy a szlovákok meg akarnák, vagy a bulgárok meg akarnák őket támadni. Tehát ez egész, ez egy kamu dolog, hát semmi jelentősége nincs. Én a minisztereimnek hiszek, de tegyük föl, hogy néhány méterre berepült volna, és akkor mi van? Ukrajna nem egy független ország, Ukrajna nem egy szuverén ország. Ukrajnát mi tartjuk el? A nyugat tartja el, mi adjuk a fegyvereit. Nem szabad úgy viselkedni a Ukrajnának, mintha egy szuverén állam lenne. Hát ő elvesztette a területének 1/5 az oroszokkal vívott háborúban, elvették tőlük az oroszok. Ott a szuverenitás véget ért. A maradék területet mi tartjuk el? Hát ha mi úgy döntünk, mármint a nyugat úgy dönt, hogy holnap reggel nem adunk egy forintot, csak Ukrajna bezárja a kész, vége, megszűnt. Tehát kicsit komolyabban kellene ehhez viszonyulni. Most 2, 3, 4 magyar drón, ami vagy átment, vagy nem az ügy, amivel szerintem az ukránok itt nem az ellenségeik vannak.
So Viktor Orban's position is whether it was 2, 3, 4 Hungarian drones that passed over, it doesn't matter because Hungary, you know, in the West supports Ukraine, and therefore we're the ones who sponsor it. And since it's partially occupied, it's no longer an independent country. It's no longer a sovereign country. And so complaints about its airspace or its territory being violated doesn't matter because it's already having its territory violated. So who cares if another country violates its territory? And anyway, they would all not be able to survive if it wasn't for our fornits anyway. Number one, there has not been a single fornit sent over to Ukraine because the Hungarians don't send shit to Ukraine. The Hungarians have been the biggest block on any support going to Ukraine in all of Europe. They have asked for exemptions from sending military aid, which they have gotten. They have asked for exemptions in sending financial aid, which they have gotten, in order to pass sanctions packages and what is necessary to apply pressure to the Russians. So there has not been a fornit sent over because the Hungarians don't send anything. What the Hungarians will counter to a claim like that is, well, we contribute to the EU fund. That is true, but Hungary is the biggest consumer of the EU fund in the European Union. They eat that stuff up like the guy got their hand in the goddamn cookie jar. The welfare state of Hungary, which has been sponsored by the European Union for years, despite the fact that they have widespread corruption scandals, not just with their domestically taxed funds, but with EU funds, to the point that it's a running joke amongst foreign diplomats. You'll have US ambassadors going to Hungarian projects that EU funds were supposed to fund, like tourism spots for like a tree forest, and they will show the heaping pile of garbage and unfinished construction that is left over, because that's how Hungarian politics has functioned under Viktor Orban. He's been incredibly corrupt. He is one of the most corrupt people in the EU, if not the most corrupt person in the European Union. A tree forest, yes, it was a forest with platforms that you could walk through with none of the trees grown and none of the wood painted, and it was just like plywood you would get from like Home Depot. Somebody can go find it online themselves. I cannot be bothered right now. It was an inside joke between diplomats. Dylan, you need a hair clip? I do not. My hair will flow. So if we're talking about sovereignty in the way that, well, without their money, you wouldn't exist. Okay. Then Hungary's not sovereign. Hungary is not independent. Hungary lost a fucking 2/3 of its territory. Does anybody remember that? Hungary also is held afloat by European Union funds, EU funds that get frozen constantly because of those corruption scandals, those very corruption scandals we were just talking about. So is Hungary not independent? Is Hungary not sovereign? Can Ukraine fly over attack drones into Hungarian airspace for fun, for practice? Because the Hungarian state has to be held afloat by EU money? And here's a question. If what Viktor Orban says about the Russians is true when it comes to their energy import, and that they simply could not afford to change it to imported LNG or any of the alternatives that the European has offered them, okay, then Russia's not a sovereign country. Hungary's not a sovereign country because they're not sovereign, because they're not energy independent from the Russians. So they don't have territorial integrity. This is not a standard you could apply without having it immediately come back and blowing up in the Hungarians' face. If the Ukrainians are not a sovereign independent country, then Hungary is not a sovereign independent country. Period. End of paragraph. This is Viktor Orban basically trying to dismiss Ukraine's right to have a country, their right to be independent, their right to have territorial integrity, and essentially saying we can violate your airspace all we want because of all the money that everyone else, not us, gave you. Mind you, it's not the Poles who actually gave a lot of support who did this. It's not the Romanians. It's not the Bulgarians. It's not, hell, even the Serbians have given more to Ukraine than the Hungarians have. Yet they are saying, because of all of the aid given, none by them, they have a right to violate Ukraine's territorial integrity. And the way he frames it is purposely cartoonish. What? Are you saying that, like, Bulgaria is going to attack Ukraine? No, nobody said anything about Bulgaria. Romania? Nobody said anything about Romania. With the Poles? Nobody said anything about Poland. They said Hungary, okay? Nobody, it's not Polish drones that is entering Ukrainian airspace. It's not Romanian drones. It's not Bulgarian drones. The Bulgarians have sent supplies. The Romanians have. The Poles have. The Hungarians haven't. The only supplies they have sent, it seems to be drones illegally in and out of their airspace. And the concern that Zelensky highlighted when the foreign minister said they're out of their mind isn't the Hungarians are going to invade us from behind. They're going to work with the Hungarian population of Ukraine to start a rebellion and overthrow this, even though there have been spy ring accusations levied against the Hungarians in those Hungarian Ukrainian communities. The accusation is, your drone entered our airspace illegally, irrespective of whatever whining and knuckle dragging they're going to do about sovereignty. And your drone entering our territory is illegal, and we're fearful that you could use that information to talk about our industry, particularly industry that's of national security importance, because Ukraine has military industry concentrated in Western Ukraine, the same areas that their drone was crossing over into. And with information like that, you can do a lot of damage to Ukraine. You can do it as leverage, as threatening to release that information, or just directly handing it over to the Russians. They'll make the best of it. but just this complete disregard for Ukrainian sovereignty. Remember, this is one of Trump's favorite leaders in Europe. I do want to throw that out there. This is the leader in Europe that after Trump went out there and said, Ukraine, put more pressure on the Russians, Ukraine does it, Viktor Orban gets angry, and then Trump scolds Ukraine. This is somebody who gets invited to Turning Point USA and like CPAC. It was CPAC. He was invited to the Conservative Political Action Conference to speak. And, you know, in English, he sounds like Gru. It's pretty silly, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have an influence. On Fox News, Tucker Carlson used to make documentaries about the glory that is Hungary. Mind you, these are the same people who crusaded against draining the swamp for years, who is now endorsing the Hungarian swamp. It's not about the swamp. It's about owning it. Look, this is ridiculous. The EU needs to take a clear stand on this. NATO needs to take a clear stand on this. NATO member states should not be using their military equipment, drones, or anything to be spying within Ukrainian airspace, especially in areas that are sensitive militarily, like military production. I think Zelensky's concerns are perfectly valid, and the way that Viktor Orban talks here just raises the suspicion that, yes, they did cross over the border. If not, then you wouldn't be talking about Ukraine's lack of sovereignty in the first place. He's like, well, we would, I mean, even if we did, do they have sovereignty? You wouldn't be justifying it if it didn't happen, no? A lot of smoke. Is there a fire? Well, if there is a fire, Viktor Orban says that's fine because Ukraine can't say anything. Ridiculous. Oh, by the way, one last thing. This is kind of important. Zelensky did warn of a military response if another drone enters. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that during the meeting of staff of the Supreme Commander on Friday, 26th of September, he instructed the military to conduct a full check concerning reconnaissance drone from Hungary, and if such drones appear again, to respond accordingly to the defense of the state. And I quote, "There was also a report from our military on, frankly, very unusual events along the Ukraine-Hungary border. Our forces spotted drones, and those were reconnaissance drones. Ukraine are currently the best in Europe at defending against any drones. We are ready to share our experience with other nations that need reliable protections against such threats." By the way, we are working with different teams across Europe right now, including the United States, to prepare them for these types of drone attacks. Part of the reason why they support Ukraine is out of defensive selfishness. They understand that Ukraine has experience, and if they need it, they're not getting it from the Russians.